this summer, what we spent a lot of time doing with the district was in our K through 7 district, or pre-K through 7 district in Roosevelt, really spending time looking at Ames test data, which is the Arizona State Assessment, figuring out what strands of knowledge kids struggled with most on the Ames test, and picking our standards based on those. So truly, every single objective in the K-7 literacy and math ISATs are aligned to a very targeted area of student need district-wide. Same is true for high school. They really went through and looked at, like, what do our kids struggle with throughout the year? What do we need to reteach in the summer that will prepare them? In the case of high school, is the only really high stakes place that they actually have to pass a test to go on to the next subject. But everywhere else, like, what do we really need to give kids to be successful in the next grade level, either immediately or on the next time they take the Ames Arizona State Assessment? So that's something that I'm really excited about. Like, it is truly, truly aligned to what's the highest level of student need. And then it also gives in elementary literacy, we saw a really big gap last year in core members' execution of that as a model, so we provided resource guides on the components of elementary literacy. So that's sort of in the short term over the summer, what it gives core members, how it helps them execute the academic impact model. In the long term, it provides core members with support tools to help them backwards plan. So thinking about, like, this is a model of how we backwards design, looking at an aligned assessment, which is something I think some PDs in the room could relate to. Like, we want to give them, like, an aligned assessment, aligned to state standards, aligned to the assessment, and a backwards planned unit that really hits on the levels of growth students need to achieve. We really want to spend some more time on this one. Okay. So I just want to then ground us in by the end of Institute. So thinking about the ISAT as a model of backwards planning. At the end of Institute, I just want to make sure we know sort of where our goals are for core members. We want them to operate with a backwards planning mindset, which I really think the ISAT helps them build. We want them to be able to describe the way the lesson objectives build towards a learning goal, which the ISAT will do for them. And then also create at a lesson level this backwards planned lesson, which the ISAT will also help them do because it provides really strong examples of what an assessment looks like, an assessment item that they can build their lesson from. So any questions about how the ISAT fits in Institute very broadly? Okay, so let's talk about where we're going in Phoenix. These are some goals that we have for our ISAT in Phoenix, and I gave you the benchmarks from the 2008 average. And this, I think some people asked about on the SD team call, like, why do we feel like we can hit 60% this year? So a couple of things to highlight here. There is an ISAT quality requirement checklist that we've customized for Phoenix. So it is basically like, what are all the things an ISAT should be to be a really high quality ISAT? We sort of across all institutes set this goal at 80%. I actually would like it to be much higher for Phoenix, and I think it can be based on the products I'm seeing from ISAT writers. These staff survey questions are things that, just to give you a sense of like the driving force behind them, like I feel like these are things that the IMT is really sort of responsible for those metrics, like investing staff in the assessments unit plan and tracking tool. The core member side is where I really want to highlight for school directors. Like these are the things that at your school site that you're responsible for, like making sure that these metrics are at or around about 60% ideally, as high as you can make them. But this is sort of where we're going. As you can see, last year the overall institute average, Phoenix was about average on our ISATs in most cases. So we felt like we were putting a large effort into ISAT redesign this year, so we feel like this is the biggest leap here with assessments. And I think just to give you a little bit of historical context, the assessments we used last summer were curriculum design. So we really felt like by putting a large effort behind it, we could grow these different things at the levels that we're stating here. Does anybody have any questions on that? If any school directors are really interested in like why this is 60%, how you can drive toward it, I think we can continue that discussion, just not like right in the moment in this session. But did you have something else related to this?
I don't know if it's related or not. Tell me to table if you want me to.
Okay.
What are the ISATs being created?
We're going to get to that.
Okay.
Oops. Okay, so let's talk about where we've been. I'm not going to show any data, but I basically want to actually, so before you start reading that, because I know that's what everyone's doing, and it's totally fine. what I did to get what we're about to read, I basically went through all of the core member open-ended comments about the ISAT from last year, grouped them into different trends of like, what were the big issues with the ISAT? This is like like I coupled this with like my own knowledge about the ISAT from last year, Kelvy's, a bunch of different people's, like, so know that I did not only frame our goals for the ISAT this year off of what core members thought about it, but like, I think that these different quotes of core members give a really holistic picture of like, what were the big problems with the ISAT? So, Patrick, will you read the first one?
Yep, the ISAT disc was extremely helpful when it came to tracking as well as the organization of material as it was all in one place. However, when it came down to the objectives, they were often too broad and were not always realistic when it came to how much time we had to teach.
Rajmi?
Some of the test objectives and questions did not seem to align.
Diana?
While the ISAT made our lives a bit easier at times, oftentimes the ISAT did not align with the summer school curriculum or state objectives.
Khadijah?
I felt like many of the objectives were way too broad for teaching one lesson. Also, a few parts did not align to the standards, which made it especially difficult. When they were aligned and manageable, then it was extremely helpful.
Rachel Parker?
Objectives were often disconnected and did not build on each other. Also, many times we were given one day or one lesson for an objective that really needed two or more to be effectively taught.
Janae?
The ISAT was helpful in assessing what needed to be covered. However, the ordering of objectives and the alignment with the final assessment was not completely effective or impressive.
Ryan?
We had so much to do in so little time. Often I would teach strictly to the ISAT assessment. In many cases, when the assessment was less comprehensive than the objective, I neglected part of the objective in order to tie in order
No.
due to time.
I think these are truly like what core members wrote, so clearly that core member. And Rachel Cook.
Some of the objectives did not work towards reaching my student-specific needs, and the flow of objectives throughout the week was choppy.
So you can see, like, if we pull out sort of some of the trends that we saw here, one, we saw a real issue with the level of alignment between the objective and the assessment. So sometimes we found places in the ISATs where the assessment was asking them to maybe identify an equation that represents multiplication of equal sets or something, but the objective said create a model of this. So it just wasn't, the function that I would teach kids how to do was different than how the assessment was talking about that same objective. Another one that we pulled out is that this disconnected and not building on each other. So the objectives didn't seem to make sense in order, and that was largely due to the way I think the curriculum went. So that brings us to another priority. And then the other is that the objectives themselves were sometimes vague or didn't really help core members understand what the student outcome needed to be. So knowing that, I'm going to give you a little bit of a glimpse, and this should also answer your question, Brian. So right now, ISATs are in their final revision stages for the K through 7 reading and math, and in the initial stages for high school.